Well, good morning. There are still beer steins under the pulpit if you're curious. And I do need to clarify, I was not condoning shoplifting last week. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and listen to last week's sermon. It was pretty good. But more than one of you were like, did you just say it was okay to shoplift? No, I did not. For our young people, that is not what I said. All right. But I did last week. We talked a little bit about this experience I had spending the summer in Germany, my last year of college. And what was interesting is I was reflecting on that last week for last week's sermon, and I thought, oh, there's another part of that story that works really well for this week too. So I was there, and I was there, for 2 months, and it's the first time I'd really traveled overseas before. So of course you've got and I of course went by myself. So I have no idea what to bring. I actually had to turn in the passport that I got when I was 2 years old, because oddly it wasn't valid anymore, to get a new one so that I could go on this trip. And so of course, you're like, I don't know what to bring, so you bring everything, right? You're like, well, I might need this, I might need that, I don't know what the weather's going to be. This is pre-Google, you can't just look up, what's the weather in Munich, Germany? That's not really possible. So you have like this amazing amount of stuff, which is when I discovered, by the way, airlines have weight limits on suitcases. I learned this at the Bozeman airport. Well, towards the end of my trip, we realized that we were actually going to be up in the northern part of Germany, and very, very actually fairly close to Amsterdam, where I was supposed to be connecting. And the guy I was with was like, well, instead of driving all the way back to Munich, we could work an extra day, and then I could just put you on the train from here to Amsterdam, and you can just catch the flight there. And in the pre-9/11 days, you could do this, right? I mean, you call the airline, you say, hey, I'm not actually going to be on that flight, but I'll just pick it up in Amsterdam. And they went, sure. They won't do this now. Don't try. Or they'll charge you a lot of money. But this was 1999. You can still get away with it. So I'm like, sure, this sounds great. Fun little adventure to end my trip. Get to do this little commute across Northern Europe to Amsterdam. Now, what I did not account for, really, until I was standing at the thing at the train station, was that the line that I would be traveling on was one typically used by commuters. Commuters don't bring 2 months' worth of stuff with them on the train. And the seat that you are assigned when you are on a commuting train is meant to accommodate like you and a backpack, right? Not you and a suitcase we affectionately refer to as monstro, and a backpack and a carry-on, and I'm sure a couple other things at this point, and some beer steins randomly stuffed in there somewhere. And so I hit the train station, and suddenly, like this sudden realization of what is about to actually try to happen, like dawns on me, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And suddenly, I wasn't, young 20s guy having this fun experience on the train. I was a guy trying to deal and manage all of this stuff that I had with me in a system not designed to handle it. And I remember there was this one case where I had to change trains at one point, and I go off one platform and onto another, and I could see no way to get from where I needed to get to where I needed to go without going up about 2 flights of stairs. And I'm just like, oh, this is not going to be pretty. So here I am, all these commuters rushing around. They're trying to get to work or do whatever they're doing. And here I am trying to facing this giant flight of stairs with these massive suitcases and one step at a time, and everybody walking past and looking at me really funny, and nobody helping, by the way. And of course, you get all the way to the top of the stairs, and I'm looking around and I'm trying to catch my breath because it was just an amazing amount of stuff. And that's, of course, when you spot the elevator. And it's just like, well, they hid that well down there. And then, of course, I could not find the elevator to take me back down, so back down the stairs we went. And I did not really see any of the countryside, and I did not really enjoy the experience of being on the train, nor did I meet any interesting people because my life was literally obsessed with this stuff that I had brought with me. And to this day, whenever you're in boarding group 4 at the airline, and they start making those announcements about overhead bin space, and you look down at your bag, and you start to think, God, airline travel really sucks now. Like, it used to be fun, but now it's no fun at all, right? And you get that kind of panic moment where you're just like, suddenly my whole life is about this bag, full of 3 changes of clothes that I don't otherwise usually care about, right? This happens. This happens to us. Life becomes not about the thing we are doing, not about the experience, not about the opportunity, not about the people around us, but there are times in life when it simply becomes about managing all of the stuff that we have put into our lives. And whether that's cleaning it or maintaining it or carrying around with it or whatever it is, and sometimes that's okay. I mean, we all need some amount of stuff, right? I'm glad you're all clothed. Like, thank you for coming to church clothed. I appreciate that. Which means you have to do laundry occasionally, and you've got to wash dishes. My children don't know this, but you do actually have to wash the dishes that you get dirty, or somebody has to. But sometimes it becomes more than it ought to become. And human beings have done a good job of making stuff more important than it needed to be pretty much from the beginning. And that's really what this story today is about with the Israelites. Now, if you haven't noticed, the Israelites have taken on this kind of pattern in their behavior where something happens that they don't like, they complain about it, God does something about their complaining, the Israelites go, thank you, and then something they like doesn't happen, and they complain about it again. Really, I mean, the whole book of Exodus is basically a sitcom, right? I mean, that's what it is. Right? Because in a sitcom, one of the hallmarks of a sitcom is things can't change, right? Because you got to be able to watch whatever episode you want to watch in whatever order you want to watch it, right? I mean, that's otherwise that's how syndication works, and without that, you don't make any money. So, like, the hallmark of a sitcom is, for the most part, something happens at the beginning of the show. There's something that some problem presents itself. Something happens where they work through the problem, and at the end of the show, they're pretty much back to where they started. Right? So all the episodes can pretty much be interchangeable. That is the pattern we are stuck with in the Israelites. They are going through this, right? So at the beginning of the story, they're like, something is amiss. Now, if you back up even a couple of verses, you'll run into this other story of the Israelites where at first they're complaining about the water. And they run into this place and the water's not good to drink, so they're like, oh, Moses, the water isn't good to drink. Moses is like, all right, hold on. He goes talk to God. God, the water's not good to drink. Okay, put a log in the water. Okay, Moses goes, puts a log in the water. Suddenly the water's good to drink, and everybody goes, oh, okay. Thanks, Moses. Thanks, God. End of episode 4, right? Episode 5, hey, there's nothing to eat. Moses is like, all right. Goes to God. God's like, hey, there's nothing to eat. He's like, all right, hold on. I'm going to send some birds and some manna. And he's like, okay, hold on. What's manna? Right? The quail we got. We know what the quail is. Like, that's a bird. We've eaten that. We know what that is. But he's like, I'm going to send... Now, what we don't get, because we don't speak Hebrew, or at least I don't think you do. If you do, you should tell me that, because you'd love to talk to you. But because we don't, what we don't get is that in Hebrew, manna is actually a play on words. It's a pun, because it has 2 meanings. Basically, manna is like the original meme, right? Like, it was a meme before there were memes. And it's basically, okay, there was a slide there. There you go. All right. And manna actually is Hebrew for what is it? So it's what man is it? What is it? So manna literally means what is it? Right? So basically God says, don't worry, I'm going to send you something to eat. And the response is, well, what is it? And you do kind of have to wonder, right? Like, you're the Israelites, you're hungry in the desert. Does it really matter what it is? Or are we just grateful you have it? And I don't mean to pick on them, but I really had to think of my children when I was doing this sermon and realized that's what it meant. Because really, every time they're like, hey, Dad, what are we having for dinner? And I will tell them, they're like, what is that? And it's like they're evaluating whether or not they're going to eat whatever they're prepared. I'm like, well, I'm not aware you have other offers for dinner. So what is it? It's what you're being served, and you will eat it or not. And the Israelites are basically in the same place. They're like, well, what's this stuff? And they're like, it's food. Enjoy it. So we have the Israelites, and they're basically on repeat, right? And so then they go and they gather their manna and they gather their food, and they're given very specific instructions. They're basically like, look, take what you need for the day. There'll be more tomorrow, except for Saturday, because the next day is a day of rest, so you can take double. But just do that. That's all you got to do. Go out there. Won't take you very long. Like if you go back a picture when the Israelites are doing it, like it literally is just like literally on the ground all around them. Like open up your tent, it's there, right? So you go fill your pot at the beginning of the day. Easy peasy, all you need. And of course they have to make it complicated, right? Like they can't just like accept that. So they go and some collect too many and some collect not enough. And then some of them get deciding like, well, wait a minute. God said there'll be some tomorrow, but what if there isn't? So let's hide some away, right? And so they take this thing that should be very uncomplicated, this thing that God has basically said, look, this is very straightforward. You're going to walk out your tent. It's going to be there. You're going to take it. You're going to eat it. Life will be fine. And they make it more complicated, right? And they try to manage it more, and they try to hide some away, and they try to make sure that, like, well, maybe if it isn't there tomorrow, then I'm going to have some, and I'm not going to be like those crazy people out there who don't. But then, of course, what happens is what they try to save won't be saved. And yet when they get up in the morning, what God has said is going to be there, no surprise, is there, right? They've taken this thing that should be straightforward, and they've made it more complicated than it need to be. Because frankly, they don't have much else to do, right? They left slavery. They don't have a lot with them. I love these depictions that we sometimes see because the tents always look so nice and everything. No way for the tents this night. Since actually a lot of people were probably sleeping out on the ground because they literally left with what they had they could carry, and there is no polyester, right? You're not stopping by REI on the way out for a nice, 6-person tent, with Kevlar poles, right? Like, that's not happening. And so, but even in this state of not having much, they find a way to take what they do have, and they find a way to obsess about it, and they find a way of overcomplicating it, and they find a way of making it the center of what they're doing, instead of making the center of what they're doing what it ought to be, which is being in this amazing story that they are in and recognizing this work that God is doing. Because that's the problem. That's the challenge. They get stuck in this cycle of repeat over and over and over again with God because they never really stop long enough to recognize what God is doing. They never stop long enough to see what's actually going on. They never reflect on the bigger picture of what is happening because they keep obsessing over the little things. They've got their suitcase. It's all they're thinking about. And Northern Europe is whisking by. And I hear it's beautiful. I don't know. I didn't see it. They're not seeing it. Now, this logically, of course, leads me to wanting to talk about the Oregon Trail. And if you are a child of the 80s or anywhere near the child of the 80s, when I talk about the Oregon Trail, this is what comes to mind because we all played it. That was the hot floppy disk at the Apple IIe computer lab. If you got your hands on the Oregon Trail, you can play it online, by the way, and it's a card game. We have it. It's a card game. No, but not actually this Oregon Trail, the actual real Oregon Trail. So, we live in a part of the world where everyone came through, right? I mean, before we were the flyover states, we were the, Oregon Trail through states, right? Like, nobody stopped here, but they all kind of came through onto other places. And so what you would do is, you would start off somewhere back east, and somebody would tell you this great story about how wonderful the West is and how there's like gold just laying around, and it's all wonderful and great, and you should go there and give it. And by the way, give me money and I'll take you, right? Like, this sounds perfect. And a lot of people took him up on it. So a lot of people left the East Coast of the United States, where there was a whole lot of folks, who've never been on a wagon in their life, never run ox in their life, and got on these covered wagons and loaded it down with everything that they thought they would need to move civilization from the East Coast to the West Coast, where the land was full of milk and honey. Right? Like, that's what we sold people. And so in the beginning, it sounds fairly promising, because you get off the boat, and you get off the boat in somewhere like St. Louis, or you get to St. Louis maybe on a train, and getting there is pretty good, and you look out in front of you, and it's like nothing but like flat cornfields as far as the eye can see, right? It's like standing in Johnstown and looking east. Like, it just looks nice, right? You're like, oh, look at all that. Flat cornfield is long. Pay no attention to what's behind me. Just look at this flat cornfields. And that's all they're looking at, right? So they load up their wagons with all the stuff they brought with them and everything they think that they need, and they would set off. And for miles after miles after miles, they would. And things would go generally as planned and following these little paths. And then something would happen. And that something that happened is what we now call Wyoming. Lovely place. And yeah. And people would run into Wyoming, and they would get there, and then they would kind of look behind them and go, yeah, okay, I see all that cornfield, but what is that in front of us, right? And it's like, oh, those are the mountains. And we'd heard about them, and they, of course, knew that they were coming. But truthfully, nothing really prepares you for the Rocky Mountains if you've never seen them before. And if you're used to the hills they call mountains out east in Appalachia, then you're really not prepared for what you run into when you run into the Rocky Mountains. And suddenly, in the distance, people saw these amazing peaks. And they knew enough to know that it wasn't just that one set, but they kept going for a while, right? And it was at this point that people looked around at the stuff that they were carrying with them and began to reconsider what they brought in their wagons. And there's actually these spaces, and they kind of litter all over Wyoming, and they're in random places that are known as the piano graveyards. And I know. See, I know. All right. And really, because what would happen is people would have carried a bunch of stuff with them to this point, and then start looking at what they knew they were going to have to go through next and reevaluating. And one of the things that they would reevaluate was that piano that they had carried sometimes up to 1,000 miles so far, and recognize, like, ooh, is that going to work? Like, is that going to move forward? If you look at the journals of these days, they're really fascinating. The journals these days, you can just, you hear them, like, just debating, sometimes day after day, about what they're going to do and whether they should take this thing with them or whether they should not take it with them. And then what generally would happen is one person on the wagon train would finally say, you know what, this isn't going to work. And they'd take that heavy piano off their cart, and they'd leave it. And suddenly that would start a chain, and next thing you know, all the pianos are coming off the carts because they recognize it's just not going to work where they're going. Now, that piano was probably the single most expensive thing that they brought with them. And it was probably the first or second heaviest thing that they brought with them. There was the piano and the cook stove, which was made out of cast iron. One of those you really need. You can argue which one it is. Kimberly will argue with me later about which one it is you really need. And there was actually this great story about a group of in a wagon train that had basically decided that they would share the piano. They would go, each person would like take a turn carrying the piano, and that lasted to about Utah, and then it was left on the side of the road too. Because as important as it was, as much life and joy as it brought them, eventually the burden got to be too great. And they had to leave it behind if they were going to move forward. It was a thing. In many cases, a beloved thing. Maybe an antique thing. Maybe something that was passed down from generation to generation thing. But if they were going to get where they wanted to go, if they were going to get where they felt God was calling them to go, they would have to leave it behind. Now, I did a Google search. I did a search before last night before I came. Currently, right now on Craigslist, there are 30 free pianos being offered in our area. You just have to come pick them up, right? And I'm not anti-piano. Some of you are looking at me like, what's wrong with this guy? Why doesn't he like pianos? I'm like, I'm fine. I'm fine with pianos. But but you think about something that somebody probably invested hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in, and maybe did, and maybe gathered around, or maybe bought with great intention and brought it to their home with great intention, then it sat in a corner and collected dust for a while, and then finally to say, look, this thing, it's not really what I need at this moment, so, I'm happy just to give it away if you're willing to come and take it. So don't buy it. Basically, the moral story is don't buy a piano. There are plenty of pianos. You can go get one. But such is life, and sometimes it's big things like pianos, and sometimes it's small things. But human beings, we have this amazing ability to obsess about stuff. We have this amazing ability to put stuff at the middle of our lives. We have this amazing ability to give maintaining, keeping up, polishing, whatever it is, our stuff, more and more of our attention. Now, again, I'm not anti-stuff. If you have a hobby, if you have something, if, polishing that thing brings you joy in life, then great. We all need that. But I think every once in a while, we need to take a step back and look around and saying, is all this stuff I have, do I need all this? Does God care? Or is this getting in the way? Is there something I'm supposed to be doing that I can't do because I'm too busy dealing with all of this stuff? Is there something I can't see? Is there somewhere I can't go because I'm too busy dealing with all of this stuff? Is it time to let some of it go? The Israelites, who have very little, find a way to obsess about their stuff, to the point it distracts them from seeing and understanding what God is doing in their midst. I have to believe, if that's possible for people who have so little, how much more so is it for those of us who have so much? How much harder is it for us to see past our stuff, to see what God is really doing in our lives or asking us to do next? So I invite you. Look around your house. Think about what you have on you. Think about that stuff that you think you just have to have, or that thing that you dust every week but haven't picked up and used in 2 years. Do you need it? Is it bringing you joy and love and kindness and grace, and is it helpful in your life? Or is it just more dusting? Just something else to take your time? Might God be trying to speak to you? Offering you something else? It's a challenge. We love our stuff because as people, we've always loved our stuff. But the truth is we are called to do something else. We are called to love God more. Amen.
Take the name of Jesus with you, child of sorrow and of woe. It will joy and comfort give you. Take it and where'er you go. Precious name, oh how sweet, of the earth and joy of heaven. Precious name, oh how sweet, hope of earth and joy of heaven. Take the name of Jesus ever as our shield from every snare. If temptations round you gather, breathe that holy name in prayer. Precious name, oh how sweet,
I will be looking for about 10-ish folks who are willing to take a picture for some of our stuff while you come to church. So I'll see you out there. And next week I have a gift for you. I'm bribing you, basically. So come to church because you need more stuff. Wait a minute. Darn it. Ruined it. All right. Well, for today, let's go. Let's go from here and out into that world that God created. Let us go celebrating the abundance that God has put into our lives. But let us not be distracted by it. Let us not be overcome by it or overwhelmed by it. Let us instead focus on being thankful for it and thankful for the God who loves us and calls us his children. Let us go and go in peace.